He pitched programmatic in 2001 and got 0 responses. 0. Then he ran the IAB for 13 years and watched the whole thing get built anyway. Now, Randall Rothenberg says the industry he helped create has no creative thinkers left in it. This is the AdCP Show. Hold the f*** on!
Welcome to the AdCP Show. My guest today is Randall Rothenberg. Randy was the New York Times advertising columnist. He wrote the book on advertising, literally, Where Suckers Moon. Still in print after 30 years. He was CEO of the IAB for 13 years and coined the phrase direct brand economy. He proposed programmatic advertising Ad Age column in 2001 and got 0 responses. Now he's on the board of the Agentic Advertisers Association with Brian O'Kelly, and his crazy opinion about the industry led for 13 years. There are virtually no creative thinkers left in it. Randy, welcome. Let's start with that bomb. And how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you. There is one correction I want to make. I'm not on the board of agenticadvertising.org. I'm an advisor to them, but the board is other folks.
Well, I think it was said like advisory board or something.
Yeah, that's fine.
So your crazy opinion is there are no creative thinkers in the industry. You ran the IB for 13 years. You know every major executive, every major company, every major initiative, and you're saying the industry you led has no creative thinkers. It's either the most honest assessment of an industry from an insider, the most devastating self-indictment. Which is it?
Well, I want to do a clarification on it because there are, without question, great creative thinkers in the advertising industry. But the part of the industry that you and I have intersected with, kind of primarily and fundamentally for the past 20 or 25 years, just kind of the technology side of it, has very much lacked creative thinkers. By which I mean that the overwhelming, let me take it from the top. Number one, creativity. Let's define it as the inspired, studied ways of attracting human beings to messages is really not something that's part of the ad tech industry. It still certainly is part of the advertising industry per se. So that's number one, starting from there. Number two is the ad tech industry that you and I have intersected with, for the better part of 25 years. It just doesn't think about those things. It's dominated overwhelmingly by transactionalists. It's people who live and breathe, how do we buy and sell advertising inventory or marketing inventory if we want to extend it out. It really does not think a hell of a lot at all about the science, art, and craft of persuasion.
So you said at CES in 2026 that AI was supposed to unleash our inner Shakespeare, but instead turned us into a choir of identical consultants, all using the same prompts. Is AI making the creativity problem worse?
It is, without question, making it worse. I think you read one of the pieces that my business partner, Matt Eagle, and I wrote about the war between creativity and crap, and where we spelled both words with AI replacing the A. I mean, and it's a very, very real problem, but it's also obviously a real opportunity, as we point out.
Do you say craft or crap?
CRAIP, C-R-A-I-P, with in parentheses, although maybe the parentheses are unnecessary. But yeah, it's the same tools that allow you to do many remarkable things that we haven't even scratched the surface of, allow you to automate such bullshit that you and I both see is the overwhelming kind of tsunami of that crap that's just kind of infusing almost every channel that we see. But of course, by the same token, it's an opportunity because that means that truly creative stuff is more necessary than ever to cut through what we used to call clutter.
Right. How much is that there are no creative thinkers versus this system just doesn't reward creative thinkers?
I think it's
If last touch attribution worked, your waiter would get full credit for the meal. We make sure the chef gets credit too. Incremental.
I think it's actually a different issue, and it's mostly one of perspective. As I just said, we inhabit this part of the industry where every day we get up and we read about and we think about and we talk to and we comment on LinkedIn posts about and we comment on Substack posts about ad tech. Ad tech is about transactions. So that's the perspective that we see. It doesn't cover the whole industry. I think you wrote something recently, just it was kind of a bit of a glancing reference to the Cannes Lions Advertising Festival, and you pointed out something that was very true and people forget. It started and still primarily is a creative festival. It was started to bring creatives from around the world to celebrate each other's work, to identify new paths about how that work of creative persuasion was taking place. And then what happened is all the media people, and then soon thereafter the technology people, flowed in. And when you go to Cannes, that's what you see. But that's not what the creative people who go to Cannes see. They see the other Cannes that's still there, talking about creative things.
So you wrote Where the Suckers Moon about creation of brand image. You went down a rabbit hole of what this image works for us actually means. And 30 years later, does anyone in the industry still care about brand image in that way, or performance marketing killed the creative ambition?
It's actually the central question that we're addressing, that John Frelinghuysen and I are addressing in the new white paper. One of the things that I've had a good time reflecting on, I'm going to go around the corner on this one, but circle back. One of the things that I've had a good time reflecting on as a historian of advertising is that almost from the beginning of the modern advertising industry, which we might as well date to 1930, we can get into the reasons for that. Almost from that very beginning, the industry has been dominated by pseudoscientific theorists, each one spouting a new version of how advertising works. I mentioned in the first white paper, the one that John and I did for WARC, we talked quite a lot about Rosser Reeves and his very spurious pseudoscientific theory of the unique selling proposition. But he was one of a very, very long line. David Ogilvy, who was Reeves's brother-in-law, had a contrary theory, which he called brand image. Bill Bernbach had a somewhat complementary theory, which is the theory of how you say things is more important than what you say. Claude Hopkins, much earlier in the 1930s, had a theory about the rationality of direct response advertising that directly contradicted the dominant behavioral theory of John B. Watson, who was the first head of research at Young and Rubicam, which was all based on behavioral psychology and the importance of love and rage in advertising. Ernest Dichter in the 1950s and 1960s promulgated motivational research, which kind of tied into what is the entire history of advertising, is a history of one bullshit theory after another that's not provable, not falsifiable, doesn't have any of the elements of an actual scientific theory.
Right.
But yet, for a time, these things dominate the industry. And you could argue, and we argue in the paper, that performance marketing is another in the long line of those spurious theories. It certainly explains something, but does it explain everything? I mean, that's hogwash.
All right, so your what people get wrong answer paraphrased Harold Innis. Communication technology determines the biases of knowledge, which determine the organization of power, which determine the structure of empire and society. So that's either the most academic answer each guest has given me, or it's just insane. Can you unpack it? What does this mean for the advertising industry in 2026?
It's it's bigger than the advertising industry. I should tell people, your viewers, your listeners, your absorbers, a little bit about Innis. Innis was a Canadian scholar. He was Marshall McLuhan's teacher. I mean, so a lot of McLuhan's much more famous theories about the medium as the message really derived from his tutelage under Innis. And if you want to kind of unpack and translate, probably somewhat inaccurately, but I'll do my best, what Innis was saying, which is quite profound, and also when you hear it, it seems almost self-evident, is that new technologies create new ways of communicating. Those new ways of communicating become dominant in a culture, and they actually begin to both constrain and propel how people communicate with each other. And when I say communicate with each other, that ranges from individual communication, like what we're doing now, to more to commercial communication, the stuff that we talk about and do for a living. So
is this technological determinism? Like, does technology determine the industry, or do we still have some sort of agency?
It certainly determines. Without question, it determines. And then, agency develops within those constraints. So, you work with the tools you got. And the theory of the case is that the tools become dominant within a culture, within a society, within an economy. They become dominant because they allow you to do things that you couldn't do before that you want to do. Now, other things may get left behind because of the new technologies, but they're still kind of propelling you forward, which is why they gain mass adoption. And the gaining of the mass adoption starts having mass social effects and cultural effects. And again, when you say it that way, it becomes obvious. I'm old enough that I can still quite very vividly remember when I first saw color television. And so my first couple of years, now I'm not old enough to precede television, but I'm old enough to remember our big, black and white monstrosity, and when it got replaced by the little portable color set that my dad got as a bank giveaway. So I remember how color television changed things. My grandparents remembered how radio changed things, and the things being everything from what they talked about day to day to what they believed to what they bought, to what they desired. And we've all lived through that with social media because we're all old enough to have lived in a world before social media. So we're all well aware of these things. And I think, we're now becoming equally well aware of how AI puts both takes away barriers to communication and creates new constraints to it as well.
So I want to talk about the Mama paper you wrote with Freelandhuisen.
Yeah,
Am I saying it right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Dodit covered it under the headline, Why Rothenberg and Freelandhuisen Just Lit a Fuse Under the Ad Industry. Can you walk me through the thesis? What is Mama, and why did it need a fuse?
I'm not sure if it needed a fuse. It kind of wanted an identification, but Mama is fairly straightforward. It stands for Marketing, Advertising, Media, Measurement, Analytics Engines. And it was all an observational premise. And I can tell you exactly what happened. As we were discussing before, I'm an avocational musician, which means I know a lot about music and I'm pretty good at it, but I'm technically, I suck. I wish I were better. That's why I have all those guitars back there. But I've been spending a lot of time over the past couple of years teaching myself digital music composition and production. And it started from a really simple problem. I could never figure out how to record my guitar into the computer. I knew it was easy to do. I just couldn't figure it out. Somebody told me, "Oh, you got to get a box." Got it sitting right over there. I went to get the connection box, and the guy said, "Oh, get this one because it comes with a piece of software, a digital audio workstation that you'll be able to use to compose things." I said, "Oh, that sounds great." Took it home. Took me 5 minutes now to start recording my guitar into the computer. But then I said, "Oh, let me see what the software does." And that was going down through a rabbit hole. What digital audio workstations do, and that was the metaphor that John and I were pursuing. What they allow you to do is, or what they are they're great assembly devices. They allow you to acquire, to lease, to rent, or to buy thousands upon thousands upon thousands of data plugins. Those data plugins are most recognizable in the form of actual instruments. The way I like to tell people the story is that every instrument that's ever existed on the face of the earth now exists in digital form and can be acquired for very little money. And then millions of instruments that never existed on the face of the earth because they're synthetic synthesizers also are there. You can now lease these things, bring them into your digital audio workstation, which is a piece of software. It's a category of software. It's not dominated by any one company. There are about 20 or 30 companies with digital audio workstations. And you can integrate these things, you can acquire from a large open global marketplace of musical data products and create any kind of customized composition that you want. And now, in the new world of digital audio workstations, you can also distribute directly from them to distribution platforms. You can measure, you can optimize. And it struck me at a certain point that this was a perfect metaphor for that holy grail that we've been talking about in marketing and advertising for decades, which is the infinitely customizable dashboard, where you can bring in all the data that you want from anywhere that you want and start regressing it, analyzing it, and using it for decisioning. So John and I started doing the work with the intention of describing this as a model for what should happen. And within the first couple of weeks of working on the paper, we discovered that it was no longer a model of what should happen. It was actually out in the marketplace in many different kind of forms and prototypes because of AI. That the first generation of AI marketing ad tech founders and experimenters were creating pieces of this mama machine. And so instead of using the paper as an argument for what should happen, then evolved it to describing what is happening and where we think, and reporting indicated, the industry should go, how marketers would start using this, how publishers and agencies and ad tech companies would react, how the piece parts would fit together, and why this concept of mama engines was an inevitable reality that we're going to be facing. And in fact, as we've seen, we published it in September, the marketplace keeps kind of reinforcing this direction. Just to leap ahead to something that you would kind of obviously ask. I mean, if you look at the rationale that Arthur Sadoun talked about yesterday for the live ring, it was basically, we're trying to create a mama engine inside Publicis. So you've already seen it. Horizon did something similar with Horizon Blue. WPP did something similar with WPP Open. But fundamentally, these are lagging indicators of what's already happening in the independent marketplace, which is this, I keep calling it a giant regression analysis machine in the cloud. But that's really what's happening.
So I have a note, you're on the intern board of the Agentic Advertising Organization. You said you're not, but I looked it up and it says you are.
Well,
with Brian O'Kelly. And the IAB Tech Lab has, I mean, obviously the AAO has AdCP and the IAB Tech Lab has, I don't know if you're supposed to pronounce it, ARTF or ARTF. They're two competing standards. Do people think that like you betrayed the IAB, or is it an evolution or correction maybe?
I just think that's one of those silly interior debates that has almost nothing to do with what's going on in the marketplace. Just to make it like really clear, I love the IAB. I feel very, very proud of what we've accomplished. I think David Cohen is better than I am in the job, and I'll take credit for that because I helped lead his hiring. I think Tony Katzer is amazing. But what I've told them, and I've told Brian and everybody else we work with, you know what? There's a lot of work to go around here. There's plenty of room for everybody. The thing,
do you think it's become a standards war? Is this going to be VHS versus Betamax?
I don't think so. I mean, but that gets into a really, really interesting set of questions that's hard to, parse at this vantage point. I would start with kind of I think an important foundational premise, which is that from an analytical point of view, actually don't need, just from an intelligence point of view, the phrase that John and I are now using and will use in the next white paper to describe the marketplace as it's evolving, especially from a brand back perspective, a capabilities perspective. We're calling it universal marketing intelligence. That's a much better way of thinking about it because capability as opposed to MAMA, which is a machine. So, but if you start kind of foundationally, one of the first things that you encounter is that at the pure intelligence level, the intake of data, the analysis of data, the generation of insights from that data, the ability to measure and apply different kinds of measurement and data from different parts of the organization or the wider world, the ability to do that does not require standardized protocols. Data normalization is actually one of the great strengths of LLMs. So you don't need these foundational protocols to bring in and use unlike data sets. That's really, really important. Where you do need unifying protocols like ARTF or AdCP is at the executional level. Executing marketing campaigns can involve a pretty complex multi-step workflow, and those workflows can be very, very, very different from each other. And from a brand's ideal perspective, its workflows will be unique to its needs and won't necessarily want to be boxed in to what another company is doing over there. So with that backdrop, what AdCP is important, what ARTF is important. They don't necessarily conflict with each other. My observation is relatively straightforward, that what Tech Lab has been focusing on is the transactional side of advertising. It's mostly about gentrifying the buy-sell workflows. What AdCP allows, and the reason that Matt and I found it really interesting to work with them and why we wanted to work with them, is it integrates lots of other things, or attempts to integrate lots of other things into the protocol that are separate and apart from the transaction side. It allows, for example, for discovery not just of the classic kinds of formatted inventory that are the long-standing basis, the spots and dots of advertising, but it can find inventory and ideas that don't conform to pre-existing inventory norms. It allows for the creation and negotiation of marketing programs that don't have anything to do with inventory-based advertising. It allows for the integration of strategic insights, creative ideation, creative production. Our assumption, our guess, is that as companies increasingly want to gentrify their end-to-end marketing workflows, that many of these different kinds of protocols will be necessary. Now, as far as whether they merge together into one giant protocol, I am not a developer or a programmer, so I can't answer that. Maybe yes.
So you also said that AI agents should reimagine core systems at orders of magnitude, not shave pennies off media buys. CMOs should be growth drivers, not cost cutters. Is the industry using AI for the wrong purpose? Because most AI adoption that I see is about efficiency and not reinvention.
Yes, to this point, it definitely seems that. But I want to bring back that perspective issue that we talked about, a couple minutes ago. That may also just reflect the kinds of people that you and I talk to all the time, and the kinds of literature and social media that we absorb all the time. So we may have a selection bias here. I'll tell you something really interesting, and this has stuck with me now for exactly a year. When John Frelinghuysen and I were beginning the research and we were diving in, and remember, I was coming into it from a creative perspective. I've been fascinated by these creative tools. One of our hypotheses was, wow, this is a real threat to creative people. Real threat, because it automates so much of what they do. And in fact, so much of the early conversation and public commentary was about exactly that. I remember sitting in on this big public Zoom meeting where the guest speaker was Martin Sorrell. And that was the basic total of his conversation, that is going to cut the shit out of creative costs. So anyway, about a year ago, with that as backdrop, John and I went to the Smartly Advanced Conference in Brooklyn. And it was kind of astonishing because, I don't know, there were 300 or 400 people there. It seems like all of them, certainly the majority of them, were creative people. They were either directly creative people in the marketing industry, copywriters, graphic designers, producers, or they were creative adjacent. And I hadn't been around that enthusiastic an audience in an advertising technology setting in years and years and years. And it's trying to reconcile that with the hypothesis that, oh man, creative people are really threatened here. And the answer was, they don't feel threatened. Just as with the beginning of desktop publishing 40 years ago, they think of this as a new set of tools that can ideally liberate them, and extend their capabilities into new areas that they could not access before. So I think that it's an important kind of, that's the word I'm looking for, an important kind of corrective to the hypothesis that we're over indexing on transactional efficiency. We definitely are, if you pay attention to the ad tech cartel. But if you go outside the cartel, you're going to find creative people as gaga about this for effectiveness and enjoyment reasons as not.
All right, we're going to throw you briefly on a desert island because we got to move on soon. You chose Mickey O'Hagan, who I don't know who that is, Rick Moranis, Bruce Fairstein, Tony and Carla Hendra. These are not industry people. Can you walk me through each one, starting with Mickey O'Hagan, who I suspect might be a personal friend of yours?
Well, she's a personal friend, and she's legally a friend. She's my beloved wife.
Okay.
She's also, I just to put in a well-deserved plug, a pretty well-known actress who's been part of Sean Baker's kind of repertory company from the beginning of Sean's career. So she had a small role in Honora, which won a lot of Academy Awards, and she was the co-star of one of Sean's earlier indie hits, Tangerine. So that's Mickey.
Okay. And Rick Moranis, we all know him from Ghostbusters and, of course, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, SCTV. But more importantly, he famously walked away completely from Hollywood after his wife died in 1991 to take care of his kids and raise them. He chose family over fame. Is that why you picked him?
I picked him because he's a dear friend of mine, and I've known him for 40 years. And, I know his kids, and they now have kids. And
wow.
I'd say if there's a unifying thing across all the people that I named, it's they all are great readers, great thinkers, great talkers, and they're lovely to be around with. Tony, unfortunately, passed a couple of years ago. I put Tony and Carla on the list because they're one of my favorite couples, just incredible raconteurs, completely different from each other. Carla, long-standing, very senior advertising industry executive. Tony, co-founder of the National Lampoon. And
do you think that
Spinal Tap?
Perhaps Rick Moranis leaving at the right time might be the ultimate creative act?
I don't think he thought of it that way. I think he just, I'll say this, I don't want to violate any privacy or anything. I just say that somebody making decisions that put family over everything else, it's extraordinarily honorable. And you got to love somebody who loves that much.
So I'm going to assume Bruce is a friend of yours from journalism because I see the overlap between Spy and the New York Times.
Well, Bruce, how did I meet? I met Bruce, trying to remember.
He wrote Real Men
Don't Eat
Quiche.
I've known Bruce for like 50 years, and I'm trying to remember. He had already left the advertising industry at the time I met him. By the time I met him, Bruce had been a kind of a young star copywriter at Ammirati and Puris. By the time I met him, he'd already had his first bestseller with Real Men Don't Eat Quiche. He went on to a great career as a screenwriter and other things. But again, it was mostly that he just has this incredibly broad-ranging intelligence and can just bring a lot of facts and ideas to bear, and has just a very amusing, sometimes wry amusing, sometimes, balls out, amusing way of looking at the world. So again, it's like, I'd say all the people I named, share kind of a lovingly jaundiced view of the world and a delight in kind of picking it and themselves apart.
So you chose your superpower as flying, and you made a really good, astute statement here, is that you can divide people into two camps, flyers and time travelers. However, you proposed programmatic 25 years earlier. Why didn't you choose time travel?
Well, I think there's an obvious answer to that, and people just forget it. If you're going to travel in time, everybody assumes that the power of time travel and the power of flight go together. So
right.
I want to go back in time, and I want to hang out with George Washington. Well, you know what, dude? If you live in Nome, Alaska, and you travel in time, you're going to go back 300 years. you're still going to be in Nome, Alaska. You're not going to see
Well,
George Washington.
in theory, if you fly fast enough, you will, towards the speed of light, you will.
Yeah, but that's different.
That whole relativity thing.
Yeah, it's like that's the Superman thing, fly around. Then you fly around the world in the other direction, and you can reverse time and all that. It's like, now come on, who's going to believe that bullshit? That doesn't work. The sheer fact of the matter is, let us just stipulate: if you're going to travel in time, you're going to travel to the exact spot you're in right now. So, what would you rather do? Would you rather go back in time to where I'm sitting right now on the Upper East Side, or would I rather fly to Paris?
But I can fly to Paris. It's called a plane ticket.
Yeah, I know. But what if you could do it for a lot less and a lot more quickly with better scenery, and you don't have to hang out in airports?
We'll have to agree to disagree on that. So, rapid fire, whatever comes to your mind. Best creative ad you've ever seen?
It's a creative ad I've ever seen. I should have a ready answer for that, right? Let's come back to it, just because I would end up probably naming something conventional. I do think.
How do we come back to it? We're going to end the show.
You're right. The
worst creative sin in advertising right now.
Well, let me come back. Let me answer it. I do think that the famous Apple 1984 ad was a brilliant creative ad, and I know that's not an original idea, but it's hard to top that one.
Worst creative sin in advertising right now?
Repetitive slop, AI-generated slop.
Most overrated concept in the ad industry?
Rated concept in the ad industry. Well, I'd have to say performance marketing.
Underrated?
I thought, underrated or overrated?
No, the next question is most underrated.
Oh, okay. Overrated is performance marketing. Overrated is performance marketing. Underrated, it would have to be the power of creative communication.
If Ken Roman was alive and saw agentic advertising, what would he say?
He'd be very excited. Ken just died a couple of weeks ago, but I should let people know who he was. He was the absolutely inspired CEO of Ogilvy at the time WPP made its successful hostile offer for it. And was one of the great enthusiasts I've ever met in my life, and a real inspiration, who gave me kind of essential guidance as I was about to leave to go to IAB.
Right.
He helped, frame. So very important in my life. I think Ken would be all over it because he was an enthusiast, and he was a creative person at heart, who ended up as an account guy. Heart of heart. He's a writer and a journalist, and he would have seen it, and his first thought would have been, how do we use these tools to create things that will attract people to our clients' businesses?
And last question, one sentence for every CEO who has not yet called you about AI onboarding.
You think this is a technology implementation, but it's not. It is fundamentally about change management. It's about reimagining the way people work and the way that the relationships between all those people get transformed by the existence of these new integrative technologies.
So, Randy, thank you. You are the person who wrote the book on advertising, ran the industry's trade association for 13 years, proposed programmatic 25 years before it existed, coined the direct brand economy, and now is building the infrastructure for agentic advertising. I'm Pesach Latin. This has been the Adodit Show. Read Innis, read Where the Suckers Moon, and for the love of advertising, start thinking creatively. See you next time.
That was Randall Rothenberg, who built the room, ran the room for 13 years, and then sat here and told you there's nobody creative left in it. Somebody frame that. Massive thanks to our sponsors. Troutman Amin LLP, the lawyers who actually understand ad tech, which is either a superpower or a diagnosis. And Incremental.com, who measure things that happened instead of things you'd like to believe happened. I'm Pesach Latin. This has been the AdTP Show. Stay bold, stay curious, know more than you did yesterday.
Season 9, baby, let's go.